It was just a handful of days ago at the 2025 Consumer Electronics Show that My Arcade unveiled the Atari Gamestation Go, a new retro-themed handheld gaming device with more input options than we've ever seen on a unit of this kind. In between posting videos from the CES show floor, I did my best to keep up with all the questions and comments about this system and its peripherals, but I did notice the same queries popping up again and again. So in this video, I'll be running down the top 10 most frequently asked questions about the Atari Gamestation Go, and, more importantly, the answers to those questions. Hey there, welcome back to GenXGrownUp. I'm John, and I am a GenXGrownUp. Thank you for taking the time to click on this video. We first saw the Gamestation Go over a year ago at CES by the name Gamestation Portable, with an estimated release date of Q4 2024. Well, we know that My Arcade missed that release estimate, but they stayed busy working behind the scenes to improve the product for release this year. I know from my comments section that you have questions and want to know more about the GSG. So that's the info I'm going to consolidate here in this video. But first, I want to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Aura. You watch the news, so you know there have been a number of high-profile data breaches recently. Big online companies like Dell, United Health, and Ticketmaster have suffered breaches that have compromised the data of hundreds of millions of users. Most alarmingly, a few months back, National Public Data announced a major breach that could impact every American, with over 2.9 billion records exposed, including names, addresses, dates of birth, and social security numbers. And we know hackers have posted all of this info on the web for free, so if you haven't been taking your online data seriously, now's the time to change that. You can feel secure if you use Aura, today's sponsor. Aura monitors your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to alert you about potential identity theft. They also provide up to $5 million in identity theft insurance in case the worst happens. Plus, Aura keeps you safe online with real-time alerts for data breaches, a VPN for secure browsing, data broker opt-out, a password manager, and more. Don't leave your family vulnerable to data breaches. Just go to aura.com/GXG and try 2 weeks for free. That'll be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. Now, these frequently asked questions are the top 10 I saw, but I've listed them here in no particular order, so let's start with release date. The Atari Gamestation Go, as well as the companion Mega Player and associated controllers, are all scheduled to be available August of this year. Now, I know My Arcade had a release date for this unit last year and it slipped. And of course, there are no guarantees, but from what I saw when I was hands-on with the GSG at this show, it's much closer to being ready for prime time than it was the last go-around. So I'd put my money on them making this release. Okay, let's move along to price. When we first saw the Gamestation Portable over a year ago, it had an MSRP of $149. Now since then, My Arcade has invested another year's worth of R&D into the product, but I'm happy to report they did not increase the price. The Gamestation Go is planned to release at an MSRP of $149 US. Now this gets you all you need for solo play, but if you plan to hook it up to the TV and want a wireless controller or want to jump into multiplayer, you're going to need an extra controller, and you have options. Either the Gamestation Arcade Stick, which lists for $69, or the Gamestation Gamepad for just $49. Now other controllers might work, it's too early to know about that for sure, but these options are much improved over the GSP Stick from 2023. Okay, let's talk about supported systems. The Gamestation Go is predominantly a retro player system, but with its improved internals over the Gamestation Pro, there's more horsepower to work with. Now, first of all, you can expect the bulk of the GSP's library and systems to be here. Atari arcade games, Atari 2600, including this time around some M-Network titles, Atari 5200 and Atari 7800 are all represented here. At the moment, my quick audit was that this represented about 130 of the advertised 200 games preloaded. In addition, the GSG includes 7 balls of steel pinball tables, a selection of 8-bit, 16-bit, and arcade titles from publishers Pico and Jaleco, 3 versions of Pac-Man, including Arcade, Arcade Speed Up, and the much maligned Atari 2600 Pac-Man, and Centipede Recharged. Now, MyArcade reports that more Atari Recharged titles will be coming to the system, and they will be added for free with system updates. Now, the elephant in the room here is what's missing. What about Atari Lynx, Atari Jaguar, and Television? These all seem to be obvious inclusions considering the controls and that numpad especially. And yes, I'm as frustrated as you are, especially about the Lynx. An Atari handheld without any Lynx representation? Blasphemy! What I can tell you is not to abandon hope. MyArcade wants to include more on the GSG, but there are limitations to their licensing agreement with Atari. They have absolutely heard your criticisms. They do read the comments here, and even now are still in negotiations with Atari about trying to include more platforms at release. There are no guarantees, of course, but there is still hope. Then there's always that SD card slot, but more on that later. For now, let's move on to the controls. Probably the most touted feature of the Gamestation Go is the variety of available inputs, and that cool Smart Glow feature that only illuminates the controls needed for the currently active game. But even after a further year of development, the controls aren't quite what we all might hope. Let's start with the rotary control, which last year was a paddle, and we all encouraged MyArcade to switch to a spinner for classics like Tempest, Major Havoc, or Indy 500. Well, dear friends, it's still a paddle. I know. I want it to be a spinner too. I expressed our desires. We'll see what happens. Moving down the left side of the controls, we get to the D-pad, which is sadly still a digital D-pad. Now this meets incomplete compatibility with Atari 5200 titles, which require analog input. Now in some cases, software can mitigate that incompatibility, but it's not the same. The D-pad feels fine, but it is still just a digital D-pad. And finally, the trackball. I'm happy to report it feels great. The slightly larger ball on the arcade stick is even better, but even the standard one that's on the gamepad and the GSG spins freely and worked well in my testing with Arcade Missile Command. It was a little bit jittery at times, but I know those things are still being fine-tuned, so I'm going to withhold judgment until we see a release unit. Now, while we're talking about controls, a couple more questions I saw pop up. Firstly, backward compatibility of the controls with the Atari GSP. Now, after announcing some alternate controllers last year that never materialized, I think it was a logical assumption that we all made that perhaps the arcade stick or gamepad for the Go might be compatible with the GSP. Well, the short and unfortunate answer, straight from the engineers I work with, is no. No, Gamestation Go controllers are not compatible with 2023's Gamestation Pro. Now, that's the official word, but I'm eager to do some testing of my own. I have great confidence that these new controllers won't pair wirelessly with the GSP, but what about hardwired? The GSP is notoriously finicky about controller compatibility, but a number of other controllers do work when plugged into the USB-C port. So with these new controls coming from MyArcade themselves, I'm curious to see if perhaps there is some limited compatibility when hardwired. Again, MyArcade says no, so I'm going to trust but verify once I get a chance to. Speaking of those new controllers, I saw a lot of you ask if the arcade stick and/or gamepad were compatible with PCs or other devices. Once again, the official word from MyArcade is no. Communication, again this time around, is 2.4 gigahertz, not Bluetooth. So like with the GSP, wireless compatibility is almost certainly a non-starter. But again, as with the GSP, what about hardwired? Even that old GSP controller had some limited functionality when plugged into a computer via USB, so I'm looking forward to trying that out for myself with these new GSG controllers. Beyond that, when I was speaking with the MyArcade engineers, I shared your comments with them and suggested that if the GSG controllers don't play well with other devices, perhaps they consider a separate product with all those great inputs designed specifically for Bluetooth pairing with other devices. Now, I'm not sure they're convinced, but they listened, and we will have to wait and see. Okay, while we're at it, one more controller question I saw a lot. Can I flip the GSG upside down? Now, I saw a lot of comments asking why the controls were backwards or upside down for right-handed people. Now, I don't fully understand this since the norm for almost all modern controllers these days is action buttons on the right and directional controls on the left. Maybe I'm a little bit ambidextrous or something, but I had no trouble with the control orientation. But I get it, hand preference is very subjective, and I do understand the concern. The follow-up question then was, can I flip it upside down? Now, this would be interesting. That would swap the location of the buttons and the directional controls, though it would make accessing the shoulder buttons next to impossible, but that would be a decent trade-off, I think, for most retro games. Now, I asked my arcade about this, and while this is not a feature planned for release, they are open to adding a flip function in a post-release update, so no promises, but maybe. Just a few more here, and the next one has to do with battery life. Now, firstly, both the Gamestation Go and both controllers have internal rechargeable batteries. Now, that'll thrill some users and frustrate others, and I think these companies just can't win on this point. I see a pretty even split between those who are upset if they have to add batteries to a device, and those who are upset when the battery is pre-installed and rechargeable. And I understand the position of both camps. But the question I saw wasn't about the inclusion of batteries, because that's a known, but rather how long do the batteries last? Well, the answer here is that the battery life is still being measured and optimized, but the early estimate I heard thrown around, and take this with a grain of salt, was that we could expect between 5 and 6 hours of play on a fully charged Gamestation Go. Now, I didn't hear any estimates of the life of the wireless controller's batteries, but if I had to guess, I'd say it'd be at or above that, since the controllers, even having a smaller battery, have no screen to power. This is another one where we'll have to wait until closer to release to get more solid numbers. Just a couple more here, and the next question I saw regularly was asking about the wireless functionality. Now, the Gamestation Go doesn't have Bluetooth, but it does have Wi-Fi. Unlike the somewhat convoluted method we had to go through to upgrade the firmware on the Gamestation Pro, the Gamestation Go has Wi-Fi included and can update over the air once you connect to a Wi-Fi network. That sent viewers' minds reeling with possibilities about what else could be accomplished over Wi-Fi. High score leaderboards, a game store, file management? No. Unfortunately, none of those are currently planned. At the time of this video, the Wi-Fi function of the Gamestation Go and the Mega Player are currently only present for the purpose of updating the firmware as needed. Could more be done with the Wi-Fi in the future? Well, sure. But if my arcade has plans for more, they're not talking about it yet. The last frequent question I want to address here is about the possibility for expansion. Look, 2023's Gamestation Pro was a fine plug-and-play package, but the thing that elevated it beyond its pre-installed library was the inclusion of an SD card slot and the ability to add our own game files and dramatically expand on the available libraries and even games from other consoles. I asked my arcade point blank about this, and even inquired about the inclusion of cores to support missing platforms like Intellivision, ColecoVision, and yeah, Lynx. The answer I got was a little bit guarded, but at least left the door open. My arcade told me that we could expect to see at least as much expandability via SD as we saw with the Gamestation Pro. Now, that doesn't make me entirely certain that I'll be playing Warbirds for the Lynx on my GXG, but it doesn't rule it out either. Look, my arcade knows what we want to do with the GSG and are doing what they can within the limitations of their agreements with licensing partners to make it as versatile as possible. What I hope to have helped with here is to head off something I've seen happen time after time. A company announces a new product, then fans and potential customers start to project their hopes and dreams upon it and are disappointed if their wish list doesn't match up with reality. Now, as fans, I believe it's our responsibility to manage our expectations as to what a product is versus what we hope it will be. Like many of you, I'm excited about the potential of the Gamestation Go, and I'll continue to share updates and developments leading up to and through the release later this year. In the meantime, links to more coverage here and here. I certainly hope you found something to enjoy in this video, and I cannot wait to talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.